Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Filippo Voltaggio, and he's here today to share with us his new book, The Little Dog That Could, a true story of life, love, and miracles. And he's also here today to share with us his groundbreaking program, the-recalibration. Now, Filippo is a business and professional life coach, keynote speaker, author, and the former junior manager at IBM. While studying at the University of California, San Diego, he created a coursework for an emerging field, which was not offered at the time. The creation of this field of study set the tone for Filippo's professional career. So let's welcome to the show, Filippo Voltaggio.
Thank you, Marianne. Happy to be here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to not only talk about your book, but also the work you're doing with the recalibration. You know, I've got to ask you, let's start on the book. I mean, what inspired you and what made you decide that this was the time to write it?
Oh, funny you should ask that. I I didn't want to write it. And so the experience happened at this point, 13, 14 years ago with a rescued dog. And it was the whole process was so moving and so life-changing, and not just the dog, but the people that came into my life around that time. It was obviously that time for me to take a leap in my consciousness. And so as people would ask me over the following year or so, I would share the story, and I would well up with tears, or actually tears would fall down my face, and it's not because the story it has a sad ending or anything like that. It's because I was so moved. The experience was so deep, and I still didn't understand it fully. So Dorothy, who's in the book, suggested I write the experience down and turn it into a book. And I thought it was a great idea. I didn't get the turn it into a book part. What I got was just write it down. And I thought, oh, this is good. I can learn more from the process. And so I wrote it down about 2 years after the main experience. And then I did nothing with it. And people kept asking me, I thought you wrote a book. I'm like, well, I wrote it for me, but it's sat on my computer for another 7 or so years until Dorothy again, and then several other people started saying, we want that book. And I said, I don't need to release it. And Dorothy especially said, Filippo, when things happen to you, you're a communicator. You have an obligation to bring it forward. And so I thought, okay. and I did. And I didn't want to also because I still don't feel like I've learned everything that was to be learned. And maybe I never will. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, in just reading the book myself, I mean, there's so many lessons. I'm sure
Yes.
that as you go back, you're like, wow, okay, there's a whole nother perspective here for me to gain.
And that's me having written the book and then gone through several corrections of, editing and all that. Each time I've read the book and then I've started an audio version of it. And I want to say, Filippo, in chapter 2, I'm thinking, don't you get it? Really, how many chapters does it take for you to get this? This is so easy. Of course, in retrospect, means I've learned something.
Yeah. I mean, well, and I love this story because this little dog actually chooses you, and you're quite reluctant to even go there.
Yes, I had so many excuses and reasons and all of that. But, when something's meant to be, it's meant to be. And it certainly was the time for that experience to happen.
It's such a sweet story.
And those lessons.
Well, and as the lessons start to develop, at what point did you realize that having this dog was teaching you more than you thought?
You know, back to Dorothy in the book, she was the one that said, I didn't know her very well at the time, but for some reason I thought her being a spiritual teacher and well, she's so much, and I had just met her and I was just learning from her, and I knew when I met the dog that I had to call her and say I met this dog, but I didn't know why I wanted to tell her of all people. And I told her, and she said, "Oh, right. Well, then this is the dog that is going to teach you some lessons." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. This is not my dog. I don't have the time for a dog or the place for a dog." Or and she said, "Right. Well, anyway, this dog is here to teach you some lessons." And I thought, yeah, whatever. And so it wasn't until, a good month or so in, without giving out too much of the story, that I thought, okay, well, if I'm ever going to, find this dog the right home, because it's not here, then I might as well learn these lessons, whatever they are. And so I was looking for the lessons at that point.
Yeah, the reluctant student, right?
Yes. Maybe the subtitle, now that you say that, should have been when the reluctant student is ready, the teacher's going to appear whether you like it or not.
Well, the dog's name probably should have been Yoda instead of Chichina, right?
It was taken.
I bet. And she's, a beautiful Chichina anyway. Well, and so as you look back, and we're not going to go deep into this story because we want people to pick up their own copy of The Little Dog That Could, because I personally have felt it that it's so impactful. I really don't want to dive completely into it. But what would be like one of the lessons that you were like, gosh, okay, I think I got this?
Some of the lessons were simple. They were so simple, so obvious that I missed them. I that I didn't think that this was a possible lesson. As simple as going for a walk and smelling the roses. And I know that could be a cliche, or it sounds like a cliche. It actually ended up being something very impactful later on in the story, where I wanted to connect again, and feeling that I could connect by actually stopping and smelling the roses, that I could start getting aligned again, getting balanced again, connecting again to what I know to be part of my experience in this lifetime, that I don't often know that I'm experiencing, and in not knowing, potentially missing a lot of the experience.
How true is that? I mean, how often do we do that, where we're so busy with the busyness of life, we miss these things that would seem kind of simple?
Yeah, and I know, Marianne, you and I have had conversations about growing up and all, and so we might have some qualities that are similar in our lifetime growing up. So those of us who were lucky enough to have a mom or a dad or a grandmother or an aunt or somebody that would bake cookies for us, or actually cook in the home, as opposed to warming something up or buying something already packaged. Not that there's anything against that, but the whole sensation of walking into the house and it smells like cookies being made in the oven, kind of thing, and it just solidifies the experience in a way that it doesn't just taking a cookie out of a package, as delicious as that may be, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it kind of gives you this feeling of comfort and home. So it's a real, this kind of heartfelt feeling.
Right. And frankly, my life had gotten so busy. I still cooked and all of that, but I didn't take in the sensations of the experience while I was doing it, because I just needed to eat, kind of thing. When eating can be taking in not just the food, but the smell of it, the sound of it, the feel of it, and then the conversations that might happen if we're sharing it with people, like this experience you and I are having right now. And I'm the one that's honored to be having it with you. Thank you.
Oh, well, I am always thrilled when we get to have the opportunity to talk. You have so much just insight and wisdom, and this little book does the same thing, The Little Dog That Could. It just really touches your soul. And so when I look at this book in your life, it has me kind of wondering, has this had this impact with the lessons that you've learned from having the dog? How has that affected your, professional career, your personal life?
In so many ways, it wasn't just the dog, but it was definitely a time for me to take my consciousness and my life to a whole other level. And I was very ready, and and I have these milestone moments in my life that I could actually write books about, and frankly, a lot of them still have me tearing up. I recently was about to interview somebody on our show, the Life Changes show, and our guest was associated with somebody that I knew, and I started sharing a story with the guest and got all teared up, remembering that these milestone moments are what built built me up into who I am today, or helped me learn more about who I am today, and also inform where I'm headed. So the Little Dog That Could, specifically between the dog meeting Dorothy and the lessons therein with a couple of key friends that were part of this, and also what I wanted to learn and bring forth, helped inform the Life Changes show, help inform and help create the recalibration, which I know we'll talk about, and help me become a life coach ultimately as well.
So when we look back at the wisdom that you've carried with, just throughout your lifetime, how much of this was wisdom that you already knew, but you needed something to kind of reawaken that wisdom, and others that you kind of developed as you went?
Of course, you would ask a question like that, Marianne, because you get you get it, and I I came in with certain questions or certain ideas or certain knowings, one might say. And I remember sharing those knowings or ideas, feelings, and very distinctly remember them not being appreciated by anybody in my circle, from my family or friends or circle of anywhere, actually, anybody in my life. So I'm sure it's perfect, because I needed to forget them, or I needed to put them aside for a while, and whether I needed to or not, I had to, because it was hard to live with them in the kind of world that I feel I came into. But now it all makes sense, in that those experiences that came at the varied times help bridge the understandings or the knowings, and make it so that now it's much more clear, as I've experienced things, that other people have experienced things, but because I had a certain feeling about them as a child, bridging that connection, saying, oh, that's what that was. And now it has more depth rather than just, I think things should be this way.
Well, and it's interesting when people come in with a certain amount of knowledge that's kind of innate for them, like just the journey that's taken. And I think a lot of people resonate with that because we've got this knowing. It's like, okay, I don't know how I came in with it. I've got it. And at some point, that information becomes more relevant in our lives as we're going through and like, as you're helping other people to really change their lives.
The good news at this point in our development as a civilization, or this civilization, is that we want change, and we want to. I feel like we want to be better. At least the people I'm encountering, and the people I get to engage with.
So, as your life is at this point, what do you think really fuels, your passion and your purpose?
Well, I've never answered a question like that this way. So I'm going to say something that I'm uncomfortable saying, and that is the simple answer is love. Now, people have asked me, like, why did you develop the recalibration? Why did you become a life coach? And the reason I've done almost anything that I've done is I've done it because I needed it. And I either wasn't experiencing it in the way that I wanted to experience it from the outside, or I wasn't taking it in the way I wanted to be able to take it in. I wasn't feeling love for myself, and I wasn't loving what I was doing. So being able to connect to what I love about me, what I love about people, what I love about being alive, what I love about music, what I love to sing about as a singer. So and love, knowing that I needed love to be able to make it through some difficult days or difficult challenges that I was having, and not seeing it outside of me and not having it inside of me that I knew of. Really, that search, that longing, that desire to experience that. And I could say that I used to say, and in answering the question, I would say that everything I do is based on the same thing. The songs I pick, I do love the songs when I sing, and I love to sing them, and they are about love. So that's interesting. And then when I work with people one-on-one, I do my best to work with people that I can love. Like I can see them as a friend, or I can see them as a family member even, and say, if I can love this person, then I can really want to help them. And that precludes pretty much everything I do now.
Well, it's interesting because those uncomfortable places is where we really kind of find that magic and that miracle that comes forth for us. And I really have to applaud you because you are very courageous in the way that you approach not just your spirituality, also your professional growth, and you do that for other people as well. You mentioned the recalibration, and I'd love for you to share for our listeners what that is.
Absolutely, and because you just said what you said before that, I thank you for your acknowledgement, and I will say that all of this has led to all of this, which is going to lead to other things, and so I'd love to share a quick little story on our way to the recalibration. which in a sense is also a moment of recalibration, where I was standing in front of, I was backstage in front of the largest audience I was going to be performing for. And it was the first audience of that size. And my older brother came backstage. It happened to be at an Italian festival. But my older brother came backstage and he noticed I was nervous. And he said, you're nervous. Why are you nervous? And I was annoyed by the question because it's obvious why I'm nervous. I said to him, look at all those people out there. And he said, but you've been doing this all your life. And I didn't understand what he meant. My brother's very wise. And I said, I've never done this before. And he said, no, you've been doing this all your life. You were born doing this. As a kid, you used to always perform for the family and the guests and the friends and everybody that would come over. And I said, but that's different. He said, no, it's not. He said, in that audience are uncles and aunts and friends and people just like the people that were in the living room or in the kitchen at home. He says, you just don't know them yet, but you know what they're like because you've been with them. So go out and sing to them, perform for them like you're singing to the family. And that made the connection for me that those people are family. Those people are friends. I don't know them yet. But if I knew them, then that's how I would feel about them. So let me perform for them like they are already that. And so that answers to the how I treat clients or guests on the show or audiences and workshop members, attendees. It's like if I knew them, we might be friends. So why not try and start there, saying I don't know them in that way, but if I did, I would feel that, and then we would have a different relationship. So somewhere there's a bridge from stranger to friend to let's interact in a way that supports growth in that direction.
I really love how your brother reframed that because, I think there's pretty much every family has a kid that's done that, gets up and performs. And so we can relate with that. It's like, oh yeah, we used to, we'd have to, do luau songs or what have you. It's like, okay.
Right. And so that reframing or recalibration is the word I use. Is like he recalibrated my feeling of what performing is and what standing in front of an audience is about. And instead of I'm nervous, I'm excited now because I get to do this with you. So being able to look at aspects of our life that we could be entering into as some of us are getting older, or some of us are having children, or some of us are having dear ones and loved ones pass as we're going from one career to another, or our relationships are changing, romantic and otherwise, that we have certain conceptions, preconceptions about them that may apply, may not apply. I'll give you actually a great example that we're doing a workshop coming up here in a couple of weeks, and one of the trainers was wanting to share with me a part of her story, and she said to me how she went through a divorce, and of course that's always hard, and it was hard on her whole family, and having grown up religiously, and it was a terrible thing to do, and I should have known. She just was all down on herself that she had to go through a divorce. She happens to be now in a wonderful relationship, married to another man who doesn't abuse her and mistreat her and all of that stuff. So she said, in learning about recalibrating lives, she said, how do you deal with people's belief systems? And I said, great question. Let me tell you something about your belief system. You believe that going through a divorce is a bad thing. And I'm oversimplifying, but I said, even if I didn't know your background and your religious beliefs and all of that stuff, I would tend to say I know a little bit about what you went through. However, if you had grown up in a family or a culture that celebrated divorce, like a graduation, you would be talking about divorce in a completely different way. You would say, so my mother always said to me, she says, you're going to get married and then you're going to get a divorce. And then after the divorce, then you're going to find somebody great because you're going to learn something and it's going to be good for you. And so you might have been excited about getting that divorce. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that the belief system is what's making something potentially still weigh on you. The fact that you're describing it like I should have known better and it was a difficult this and it was hard on everybody. Instead, maybe if you had people around you that said, oh, great, good. Now you can go and find someone that you really love. The pressure's off and you've done that and you made your mom happy and you married the person that they wanted you to do, whether that was right or wrong. But now look, this is your graduation. And she laughed and she said, oh my God, if I could have only thought about it like that, then would have saved me a lot of grief.
Oh, what a great way to see it, though,
Well, and I'm not saying that she should celebrate divorce or not celebrate divorce, or that we should look forward to getting married so that we can get divorced. I'm just saying what serves you in that moment to get you to an even better place than where you are now. And sorry, that got a little long, but it literally just happened less than a couple hours ago, and I love that story, and I'm gonna share that going forward
Well,
in a more concise way.
Oh, I love the way you shared it with us, and I think that that's a perfect place for people to kind of really understand how this can work and how it can really change their lives. So when they look at the recalibration, like, what is the process? How does that work?
When I finally became a life coach in earnest, because I was doing it without knowing I was doing it, with even strangers calling me and wanting to talk to me, and I wasn't sure what was going on, and they said you should be a life coach, and I said, what is that? And they said exactly what you're doing. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should get a certificate or something. And so then when I called it something and I made it official, and in working with every single client, I take copious notes while we're talking, and I started, and I always give exercises at the end of every life coaching session for the client to take with them and work with throughout the week until the next time we see each other. So I started to look at the exercises and the answers that came back, and I started to look at my notes and how there were similarities in all of the conversations. Of course, that's partly me, where I would tend to go, and it's also partly the kind of people I attract. But whether they were CEO or administrator of a hospital or a stay-at-home mom, or that some of the same things would come up. I also noticed that if I asked a question a certain way, people would say they didn't want to talk about that, or they were already dealt with that. But I realized that they needed to talk about it potentially, and that they really hadn't dealt with it. So I remember one famous case where I asked a woman about her mother. Her relationship with her mother, and she her face turned red, and she said in an angry voice, "My mother, I don't want to waste any more of my time or money talking about my mother. I've dealt with my mother issues. I dealt with that years ago, and we're fine. We're just fine." And I thought, okay, noted, not fine with the mother issue. But I realized that in the direct questioning, it might have been the way she had been asked this before, or it might have been, it was just too direct. So I started going around and asking questions from the back doors, for example, or from the side, and from behind the stage, and so this set of questions started to develop that would get to the heart of the mother issue, so to speak, if there were something like that, without even mentioning the mother almost. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting, really clever. So between those two things is that everybody seemed to be needing a certain foundational work, let's put it that way. And the fact that they didn't like to be or answer the questions straight on, but they didn't have a problem answering them in a different way. I put a series of questions together, and then with the help of Dorothy and Mark, my business partners with the Life Changes Show, as we put this set of questions together and started to propose them to people in sections, like this section is going to be about this, and this section is going to be about this. As people started to answer the questions, they started having ahas because they were opening up to the way they think about things differently without knowing they think about them that way, because nobody's ever asked them that way, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, because it sounds like what you did is you took away what the trigger was, but you're still addressing the root issue that they don't want to touch with a stick.
Right. I used to, when I used to give presentations, well, I still do, but way at the beginning to try and help people visualize, like, if they were interested in taking this course or not. One of the memes I would put up on the screen was a picture of a mother, say from the 1950s or so, the way she's dressed and probably holding a dessert, I think, if I remember correctly. And the meme said in captions, "What did your mother always say to you?" And whenever I put that up, everybody would raise their hand, and they knew exactly what it was. And sadly, most of the ones that would answer would always be a negative thing. Now, surely, hopefully, mothers also said a lot of wonderful things, but sometimes those didn't get in, or sometimes they didn't stick as much. And it's not just mothers; it's fathers, it's brothers and sisters, it's teachers, it's clergy, and sometimes they could be these amazing people who made a mistake or who didn't know how to address this issue or talk about this particular thing. And for whatever reason, that becomes their life lesson or the bane of their existence. Do you know what I mean? For the child growing up.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, that usually is one of the things that when we look from a spiritual aspect, that we're here to maybe a lesson we're here to learn or gain perspective on. So it's usually, while it can seem like it's a bad thing, really isn't.
Exactly. And then when those ahas start to happen, then life can change a lot easier and quicker. And the thing that I like most about this is that in the recalibration, there is no such thing as a right answer or a wrong answer, and there's no there's no approval. Like it's not about me or any of the facilitators. It's about what each person gets out of it and what the main thing we want to give them is for them to walk away with not only all the questions, but the use of the questions as a tool, so that if they get stuck with something or are asking themselves about this particular aspect of their life, they can go and do the recalibration process on specifically that on their own if they choose to. Or a lot of them come back and do another recalibration. And so what has happened when we started the recalibration as a general course, what has since happened is we've been asked and have done a recalibration on aging, a recalibration on sexuality, and a recalibration on shame, and a recalibration on relationships. And we could go on every aspect of our lives. We can recalibrate because we've changed. The world has changed. Technology, philosophy, the way we think about things, the politics, everything has changed. And have we stopped to look at a particular aspect of our lives and see how do these changes affect or inform, if at all, how we feel about ourselves in certain areas, or how we feel about our lives in certain areas, or going forward in certain areas?
How profound is that? Because I think a lot of times when people get to this point of personal, either kind of self-awareness or some type of an awakening, they realize that they've been kind of bobbing around in the sea of life. And here they actually get to make choices and how everything can be.
Absolutely, and what it means to them at that point. Take for example, I've known several people with this issue, which has been a blessing, and for some maybe a curse. But there have been people who have said, "I want to be rich. I want to be rich." And if you had asked them what that means, they might have put a dollar figure on that. And with a couple people, I've asked them that question, and it's hard for them to think back on what it was they thought was rich, because now they don't think that's rich anymore, a lot of them. And so now that "I want to be rich" is still something that's ruling their lives, even though they might have more riches than the majority of the people on the planet, literally, and they still have that mindset of "I want to be rich," and are missing other aspects of their human existence because they're still chasing after something that they may already have.
I love that. Because there's wealth in many ways. It could be in friends, it could be love. It all doesn't have to equate to money.
Absolutely. And even the good things. One of my favorite stories is of a woman who had this amazing childhood. In one of the series of questions, she was interpreting the questions to be about her childhood, which is fine. It can be. It could also be about yesterday. So when we talk about the past, wherever the mind goes, that's where we want to work. So she went to her childhood and stopped me while I was walking by her, while everybody was answering the questions, and said to me, "This doesn't apply to me." And I said, "What doesn't apply to you?" And she said, "The questions." And I said, "How so?" And she said, "Well, I had a perfect childhood." And I said, "Well, then write that down. It's not asked. The questions aren't asking you whether you had a bad childhood. It's asking you questions about your childhood, if that's what you're interpreting." And she said, "But what am I supposed to put down? It's all good." And I said, "Maybe you can get more specific." She said, "Well, I was a good dancer. I was pretty. Had a great body." And she went on, and I got good grades. And I said, "Okay, then maybe you write that all down." And she said, "But that seems silly to me. I'm here to work on my issues, not on what's good." And I said, "Write those down, and then we'll address it in group." So when we got to the group, and everybody was talking about certain issues, she told us how great everything was and how pretty she was and how this and that. So when it came to the second set of questions, she said to me, maybe this isn't for me. And I said, if it isn't for you, you're free to go. And she said, I said, but you are here, so maybe you answer the question. She said, but again, my adolescent, so that's where she went. She says, those were good too. It was great. I said, please write that down. By the third set of questions, she didn't flag me down as I walked by her. She was too busy crying. And when we came into group, she was very quiet. She didn't want to share, so we moved on. And as I started to move on, she stopped me and said, do you know how hard it was to be the perfect child? I had to be good at everything I did. I hated dance. I hated this. I hated that. But they kept saying, oh, you're perfect. You're our perfect child. You're so beautiful. You're so this. You're so that. And she said, I hated every minute of it.
Oh, wow.
And all of us were, obviously, I knew that there was stuffs there, but to have her have that breakthrough and to be honest with herself after all these years at 70 something, and to be honest with the group and say, that, even the good, all the compliments, all the attention she was getting and all the perfectness that she took it as an edict to, you always have to be like this, or if you're not like this, we don't love you, kind of thing.
That is so powerful. And here, it's interesting as people go through this process, they may think that, oh, this part of my childhood was great. This part of my life was perfect. But there's always something that's kind of underlying that they can really, learn from all that.
As you said to me before the show started, we could always go deeper, right? And that's just it. I feel, for myself included, when I was asked to do the recalibration on relationship, I thought, oh gosh, let me do it on myself first, specifically for that. And boy, did I learn things. And then when I was asked to do it specifically for sexuality, I'm like, ooh, okay, let me do that. And boy, did I learn things. And the same for shame. It's like, wow, there's so much we could learn about ourselves if we're interested in doing so. And one of the beautiful things about this is the more we learn about ourselves, the more we can relate with other people, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Where can our listeners learn more about the recalibration and sign up or get more information and just, move forward with that?
Well, thank you for asking. I've come into the habit of setting up websites for the actual names of everything I do. So the recalibration has a website, the-recalibration.com. The Little Dog That Could has a website, thelittledogthatcould.com.
Well, then let's talk about the show. I was going to ask that. Well, and I really do want to spend a little time talking about the Life Changes show because I think it's so impactful. I mean, you've got some of the greatest guests on there, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about the inspiration behind the show and kind of some of the inspiration you're having now with it.
Happily. Since I mentioned the Little Dog That Could.com website, I want to mention that people can find the book on your website, and I'm honored to be part of Moments with Marianne's book club. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And then speaking of thanking you, we have had some amazing guests on the show, and a couple in particular, thanks to you, Marianne, and a couple coming up, actually, thanks to you. But one in particular is going down as one of my favorite moments on the Life Changes show, and that was with Selene Calloni. So thank you so much. Or actually, Calloni Williams, right?
Yes. And she loved Love the time that you guys spent together.
She was in town for a short time, and we normally do our shows live. So if anybody's listening to this before the end of 2019, the show will air the day before New Year's, actually, with Selene
Oh.
on the Life Changes Show website. So they won't find it just yet, but when it comes out, they'll see why I loved it as well. And again, so much of what I do today comes from, like you pointed to, Marianne, my childhood. And so as a child, I was very inquisitive, and I would ask deep questions, and it would annoy a lot of people. and I think it would annoy, well, maybe not now, definitely not now, but there was a time when I used to say, I hope I don't grow up to have a child like me, because I saw how difficult it was for my parents. But my questions weren't easy to answer, and also I feel I did go to university. I graduated with a degree. I started working with one of the at the time third largest companies in the world in high tech, and so I do know what it's like to have a 9 to 5 and deal with traffic. Although it's not really 9 to 5, it's more than that, and so I got to experience all of that. And when I took a sabbatical, so to speak, from that work, and ended up never going back, but I delved into all of what we're talking about, and so many of the authors and workshop leaders and seminar leaders, etc., videos and DVDs and cassettes at the time. And I listened to so much and studied so much to get the answers that I always wanted. And I still want, and the answers are changing as everything else changes. So the show was a natural progression as I started learning things that were not readily available on TV or on the news, or taught in any of our public schools, at least. Like I went through, I was learning things that people would ask me about, and I would share, and people would say, well, you should teach this. I don't know enough to teach it. And I'm not, but there are people out there who know this, and maybe we should be interviewing them. And so we have so many, not only interesting guests, but interesting subjects. And every week we offer a musical guest and their live musical performance, and they bring their understanding of the work that they've been doing through music. It doesn't matter what it is that we do. Just this morning, I was talking to somebody about spirituality, quote unquote, and she beautifully said, I know somebody who brings spirituality to the world by gardening. And I loved that. I couldn't agree more.
I love that. It's so wonderful when people find those things that really, ignite their soul. It just brings so much to everyone's experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the gardening, for example, I have friends who have homes that are not just beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, but on the outside, with the flowers that they plant and the trees and the fruit trees and the this and the that. And it feeds the soul to walk in there. And I say, or walk through their gardens. And I say, thank you for this moment that I get to do this, because you put this much love into this.
So, my goodness, you do so much work, and there's so much that you're involved in. If our listeners, and don't laugh at me because I know what you're going to say, if our listeners want to connect with you, what is the best website for them to do that?
Actually, I would say my personal website is filippovoltaggio.com. However, I spend so much time with our guests and involved in what they're doing that I tend to spend more time either blogging or posting on the Life Changes show. So lifechangesshow.com would be the central place, I think, to connect with me.
Oh, perfect. Well, Filippo, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, no. Has it been 5 minutes already?
I'd keep you longer, but I know you're a busy man. So.
Well, Marianne, I've had the pleasure of getting to chat with you a couple times, and I look for many, many more times. It's always a pleasure, and I'm glad that we let people in on our conversation today.
I'm glad we got to do that too. My goodness, it's always such a treat to talk with you. If you would like to connect with Filippo, please do at his website, filippovoltaggio.com, for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.